Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, voters in Virginia are being asked a very dishonest question about redistricting. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website, nickcraig.com. Our program this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Also tonight, our monthly Patreon hangout. We will be getting together at 7 p.m. this evening. We'll be chatting about the news, topics, and issues of the day. A lot going on locally across the state, as well as really across the world with the ongoing war in Iran. We'll chat about all of that. Look forward to chatting with everybody tonight. 7 o'clock, patreon.com/Nick Craig. That's patreon.com/Nick Craig. Subscribe today and you'll get access to our hangout, again, taking place at 7 p.m. this evening. Look forward to chatting with everybody a little bit later on tonight. Over the weekend, I was up in Virginia for a bachelor party, getting together with some friends that I went to school with. Just pretty run-of-the-mill situation, hanging out, chatting, watching a lot of college basketball as the March Madness situation continues to play out here over the next couple of weeks. And obviously, watching television, live sports, there are a lot of commercials. And so I kept seeing this same commercial over and over again. It is former President Barack Obama advocating for individuals to vote yes on a special ballot provision that is taking place in Virginia coming up a little bit later on in the month of April. April the 21st is the day in which the election is actual election day in Virginia. However, early voting started all the way back in early March. Virginia, you thought North Carolina had a very lengthy early voting period, and it does. Virginia has got the longest early voting period anywhere across the United States. And so these commercials have been running now for weeks, with the election coming up Tuesday, April the 21st. And so as I was watching these various commercials, there's a couple of different ones, one with former President Obama, one with the current Virginia governor, Abigail Spanberger. The commercials are very interesting. And I'd already heard about this proposed constitutional amendment, this ballot measure, but until I was beaten over the head with this commercial over and over and over again is when I actually started digging into some of the details. So for those that are voting in Virginia, this is the question that has already been asked and will be asked leading up to April the 21st. The ballot reads as follows: proposed constitutional amendment. Question: should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in upcoming elections, while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? So this, of course, relates to redistricting and what many call and describe gerrymandering, which is a pretty hot conversation that continues to unfold across the United States. I'll admit it's nothing new. We saw major redistricting battles here in North Carolina late last year as the North Carolina General Assembly went through with redrawing portions of congressional districts 1 and 3, which are in northeastern North Carolina. The 1st and 3rd congressional district is the areas that the General Assembly redrew. And I'm not going to get into a full-on debate or discussion over gerrymandering or redistricting on the program today. We'll talk a little bit about it. I have my thoughts on gerrymandering. I have my thoughts on redistricting. Many of you do as well. It's been pretty well played out. I've made my points abundantly clear on it. However, I do have a major issue with the way in which this question is asked in Virginia, right? You can talk about, and for those on the political left frustrated by what they've seen in states, Republican-run states like North Carolina with the legislature, but let's be perfectly clear. What happened in North Carolina was not masqueraded under what Virginia is attempting to do with this proposed constitutional amendment. Again, going through it and reading exactly what the question is. When you show up in Virginia, which most of you, of course, will not, you're residents of North or South Carolina. But if you showed up in Virginia and you were a Virginia voter and you read this question to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness, that right there is the issue that I have, because it's inherently dishonest. And that's what needs to be said, and that's what needs to be called out. Just put on the constitutional amendment to give the Virginia legislature, the Virginia General Assembly, to redraw maps. But when you throw the word, or these two words together, restore fairness in upcoming elections, you have lost me, because now you are being a dishonest broker of truth. I don't care if Democrat-led states with a Democrat General Assembly want to redistrict. The same way I don't care if Republican-led states with Republican General Assemblies want to redistrict. If the state law, if the state constitution, if the binding documents of the government of which it oversees gives the General Assembly authority to redraw maps, then they have the right to do so. Here in North Carolina, we saw that play out. Whether you agree or disagree with what went on in the state late last year, the General Assembly has that authority. Now, you can disagree with how they do it. You can disagree with the way in which it was done. You can have all of those disagreements, which are fine. But let's be perfectly clear. The state constitution gives express authority to the North Carolina General Assembly to redraw maps. They have that express authority. And so you can be politically ticked off. You can be politically annoyed with the process, but they have the right. At the end of the day, that is enshrined in state law. It is in our state constitution, and that is how the process plays out. However, that is not the case in Virginia, because it wasn't that long ago, going back to 2020, when Virginia voters, overwhelmingly 66% of them, approved a constitutional amendment just a couple of years ago, establishing what is called the Bipartisan Virginia Redistricting Commission. 66% of voters went to the ballot box in 2020, which was a good year for Democrats, obviously. Joe Biden winning the presidential election, Democrats taking control of the United States Congress. Good year for Democrats. Yet in Virginia, which of course, right around our nation's capital, supported, 66% of them supported this constitutional amendment saying, we want a bipartisan Virginia Redistricting Commission. Now, flash forward 5-6 years down the road, and the Democrat-led legislature, the Democrat governor and Abigail Spanberger, who pretended that she was a moderate to win over the people of Virginia, to her credit, which she did, is anything but, and now they are posing a question once again to voters that is incredibly dishonest and incredibly disingenuous. Do not call this or claim that you are, quote, restoring fairness. What does that mean? What is fair about this process? If you want to just come out and say, like the Republicans did in North Carolina, we are redrawing these maps to give Republicans more seats, which is exactly what was said. But there was no lying. There was no attempt to shield you from the truth. Lawmakers in North Carolina made it abundantly clear during the long session of the General Assembly in 2025 what they were doing. They didn't hide it. They didn't mislead. They didn't bury the lead on the story. No, they came out and said, yeah, we're redrawing maps. We have the ability to do so. It's enshrined in our Constitution. We're reacting to what's going on in other states, and we're going to redraw the first congressional district to make it more competitive for Republicans. Again, You can disagree with that. You cannot like that politically. But what you can't say is that Republicans pulled the wool over your eyes on the process, because it's just not true. I mean, they literally claimed right up front, Senator Ralph Heiss, who led the process in the North Carolina Senate, said abundantly clear what they were attempting to do and how they were going to do it, which I appreciate. Even if I disagreed with what was going on, which I didn't. But if I did, I would appreciate that level of honesty and fairness that you saw in North Carolina. But I will note, you are not, in fact, seeing that in the state of Virginia right now. So continuing with this ballot measure, this proposed constitutional amendment taking place in the state of Virginia. As I mentioned, I was up in Virginia for a bachelor party over the weekend, watching a lot of the NCAA men's tournament. And so pretty much every commercial break, there were these ads from a group called Virginians for Fair Elections. Surprise, surprise. One of the favorite terms of the Democrat Party, talking about fairness. It's not the case. It's not accurate, and I would argue it is incredibly disingenuous and dishonest. So here's one of the 30-second ads that I probably saw 30 times over the span of just a couple of days in the state of Virginia that is running on television. And so this only makes, to me, the situation even worse as it relates to the actual motivation behind what's going on just to our north up in Virginia.
Virginia, we are counting on you. Republicans want to steal enough seats in Congress to rig the next election and wield unchecked power for 2 more years. But you can stop them by voting yes by April 21st. Help put our elections back on a level playing field and let voters decide, not politicians. This is the responsible thing to do. Help us chart a better path forward, Virginia. Vote yes by April 21st.
So there's your ad there from Barack Obama, who is out in full force in the state of Virginia, claiming that Republicans are stealing elections and that the great people of Virginia, the great legislature in Virginia, the great governor in Virginia is going to put this whole thing back on a level playing field. Again, disingenuous and dishonest. Why is it? And I'm asking this genuinely. I'm not trying to be smug. I'm not trying to be cute about my question. I'm saying this as genuinely as I possibly can. Why is it that Democrats in the state of Virginia and in many other states can't just be upfront with what's going on? Why is it that they have to lie about the situation? Why is it that they can't just come out and say, hey, Republican states like North Carolina, just to our south, have redistricted congressional districts to give themselves an upper hand. And in response to that, we want to do and we are going to do the same thing. Why can't they just come out and say that? Again, I would disagree with the way in which they're going about that, but at least they would be honest. And to really back up the point that I'm making with this, I mentioned Senator Ralph Heiss, who is the Republican out of Mitchell County. He chaired the Senate Elections Committee that went through this process back late in 2025. And this was a direct quote from him on the floor of the North Carolina General Assembly. The motivation behind this redraw is simple and singular. Draw a new map that will bring an additional Republican seat to the North Carolina congressional delegation. Republicans hold a razor-thin margin in the United States House of Representatives, and if Democrats flip 4 seats in the upcoming midterm elections, they will take control of the House and torpedo President Trump's agenda. That is a direct quote, word for word, from the mouth of Senator Ralph Heiss, the chair of the Senate Elections Committee. This is honest. Again, you don't have to agree with what he's saying. You can think that this is a dishonest thing to do. Sure, that he shouldn't be doing this, that Republicans shouldn't have done this. But what you can't say, once again, is that you were lied to about the process, that you were misinformed about the process, because you weren't. Here's straight out of the horse's mouth. This is what we're doing it. The motivation behind this redraw is simple and singular. Draw a new map to bring an additional Republican seat to North Carolina's congressional delegation. That's it. That's the process. That's what we're doing. And I, as a political observer, very much appreciate that honesty. You are not seeing that from Democrats in states like Virginia, who just, as I mentioned back a couple of years ago, passed a constitutional amendment to implement this bipartisan committee that is responsible for redrawing these maps. And so I think it starts to make sense why they've got people like Barack Obama out on television. This Virginians for Fair Election group has got to be spending tens of millions of dollars on advertising. It was a pre-roll ad on every single YouTube video. It was plastered over all of the local breaks on television during the NCAA tournament over the weekend. I mean, they're spending a boatload of money to get this message out. And it kind of makes sense why they have to lie about it, which is exactly what they're doing. As I mentioned, 66% of Virginia voters in 2020 approved a constitutional amendment establishing that bipartisan Virginia Redistricting Commission. And so if they just came right out and said, hey, we are essentially nullifying the voice of the people just 6 years ago, it probably wouldn't pass. And so that's why they have to masquerade it under this. Well, do you want to restore fairness in our elections? Do you want to be fair about what's going on? Do you want to do this fair and fair this and fair that? It kind of makes sense why they're doing that. And so I played the ad from Barack Obama. Here's the ad from the Virginia governor and Abigail Spanberger puppeting the exact same thing. And again, continuing to lie to the citizens of the state in which she is the governor about exactly what is going on with this ballot measure.
I'm Governor Abigail Spanberger, and I'm voting yes on Virginia's redistricting amendment. It's directly in response to what other states decide to do, and a president who says that he's, quote, entitled to more Republican seats before this year's midterms. Our approach is different. It's temporary. It preserves Virginia's fair redistricting process into the future. At this extraordinary moment, I urge all Virginians to join me in voting yes by April 21st.
And so there's the phrase again. Fairness. It protects our fair process. Can anybody define to me fair? And this is one of the frustrating things that you see kind of laid out in politics. Oh, well, that's not fair, or that is fair. Okay, based on what? Your opinion? Based on whether it's something that you agree with or not? Great comment coming in on our show. Fairness isn't a fact. It's based on opinion. Exactly my point. Because you can't really determine fair. What I deem as fair and what you deem as fair very well likely might not be the same thing. But it sounds good. And that's why Democrats in Virginia have laid out this ballot measure the way in which they have. Because it's really hard to convince people that this is a good thing by saying, hey, we want to gerrymander your maps. And so they say, well, then we're just going to do this temporarily, and we're going to preserve Virginia's fair redistricting process. Another great comment coming in. If it's fair, why would it need to be temporarily fair? Well, unfortunately, it seems like you have very quickly poked a hole in this whole facade unfolding just to our north in the state of Virginia. It just doesn't pass even the most basic smell test as it relates to what's going on. And so for Abigail Spanberger and for Democrats in Virginia, this is a major moment for them. Spanberger, to her credit, ran a very good election last year. She did a wonderful job of convincing individuals that she was the moderate savior for the state of Virginia, then just days into office laid out her out-of-control radical progressive agenda. And so she has got a major national test online with this fair elections ballot question coming up here towards the end of April. And for me, it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how this process plays out. So as we continue this conversation over this fair, quote-unquote, election process that is playing out in the state of Virginia, I caught an interesting article that ran back just last week from Politico with the headline that reads as follows. Abigail Spanberger, who is the Virginia governor, faces a national test with Virginia redistricting. And the article reads, I just want to read through a little bit of it. And again, this is over at Politico, so you kind of understand where the bias tends to be on that. But just read through just a tiny little bit of this to kind of lay out a little bit broader of a picture as to what's going on. Virginia Democrats are putting pressure on Governor Abigail Spanberger to get their redistricting campaign across the finish line as they grow increasingly worried about losing their April special election and hurting their chances of flipping the House in November. The aggressive effort to redraw the state's congressional maps, if voters approve the referendum, could deliver Democrats a 10-1 seat advantage in Virginia. So you'd have 10 Democrats and 1 Republican, giving them 4 more seats that they would likely win under the current maps. But despite Democrats having a fundraising advantage 10 times that of the Republican side, the GOP is seeing strong early voting turnout. The Political article goes on to read, with less than a month ago, nearly a dozen Democratic state lawmakers, strategists, and candidates say that Spanberger's Virginia's popular Democrat governor, who cruised to victory by double digits last November, needs to step up more assertively to sell the referendum to voters. And they're warning her that she'll bear the brunt of the blame if the effort fails. That sounds like a little bit of infighting going on. And it's not that she's not doing nothing. Spanberger has endorsed the referendum and launched an ad supporting it this week, her first of the campaign, as Politico first reported. But critics say it's a bare minimum for an effort that is supposed to be a top Democrat priority as the party works to counter GOP-led states that are redrawing their own maps. Democrat Beth Macy, who is running for Congress in one of the 5 House districts currently held by the GOP, told Politico, quote, "We Democrats got to stop bringing a spork to a knife fight. If Democrats are putting all their stock in this, then let's bring our A game." She added that it would be, quote, helpful for Spanberger to be a spokesperson on redistricting because she did so well and won by so much in 2025. And so this is very interesting to watch this kind of infighting take place on this ballot measure. As I hope I've made the case up to this point on the program, it's very dishonest. It's very disingenuous. And I would say in large part, it is a lie in which they are telling the voters of Virginia. It's just a lie. It is a dishonest representation of the truth. And so you've got this very long constitutional ballot amendment that I just read through, and this word fair in it, fair elections, which, yes, turns out everybody supports. I mean, unless you're a literal fraudster, you support fair elections. I think if you went out and talked to 100 people and asked them, do you support fair elections? Most individuals would say yes, because inherently, in general, people support what they, in their own mind, describe or have the opinion of what is fair, right? Everybody wants something to be fair. You don't want to be at a disadvantage. You want things to be fair. And so, again, it goes to the disingenuous nature of what's going on. But reading this article over at Politico and looking at some of the early voting numbers, which we'll get into here in just a couple of minutes, it would appear that this charade is not working, at least right now. Will this measure still pass? Who's to say? I mean, the election is not until April the 21st. There is still a lot of time left for things to change. I would imagine that this is a pretty exhausting period in the state of Virginia. You've had these commercials. You've had this campaign running going all the way back to March 6th. You've got an insane amount of days in early voting in the state of Virginia. So there's probably some level of voter fatigue. That is a very real thing that exists. You typically see that in off-year elections during the municipals. We see this very clearly here in North Carolina. Virginia has a weird election cycle. But here in North Carolina, when we had our municipal elections back last year in 2025, turnout is very, very low. People are really all not that interested in what's going on, and they just frankly don't show up. That's why you see voter turnout in the single digits or the teens in some areas of the state. And a lot of that is voter fatigue. And I would suspect that is taking place in Virginia right now. Back to the Politico article. Prior to her inauguration, Spanberger, who campaigned as a moderate focused on affordability for Virginians, stopped short of fully embracing the drastic redistricting plan that the Democrat-led legislature eventually approved. Once in office, she began towing the party line and signed legislation enabling the referendum to go before voters. But she hasn't been nearly as outspoken on the issue as other leading Democrats in the state or other Democrat governors who have pushed for gerrymanders in their states, like Governor Gavin Newsom. The article goes on to say the stakes are high for Spanberger. A loss on redistricting could impact her rising star status on the national stage. However, Spanberger's team argues with what some of these points are, noting there isn't a Democrat in Virginia who has done more to encourage voters to support this referendum than Governor Spanberger, said a Spanberger spokesperson. She's a particularly effective messenger because she's meeting voters where many of them are. Virginians who support the bipartisan commission in 2020, but understand that the ball game changed when the president claimed that he's entitled to more Republican seats in Congress, and states got to work to giving it to him. And so the article, I'm not going to read much more of the article. It, of course, goes through a litany of other issues talking about what's going on in California, where similar discussions are taking place as well. But it is interesting because to me, there's a lot on the line. And to Politico's credit, they highlight one of the larger issues that's taking place. And I talked about this when we closed out the program yesterday. Right now, Democrats are struggling nationally with an identity issue. They are very split on a variety of different issues. They are all over the place on this stuff. There is no true leader of the Democrat Party. That has remained the case largely since 2016. You saw a little bit around Joe Biden in 2020 going forward, but because of his cognitive and mental decline, it was very hard to make the guy who vanishes for 40, 60, 80 days at a time and is never seen publicly. It's really hard to make that person the voice of your party when he's literally never around. I mean, you look at why Donald Trump remains such a powerful figure in the GOP and why he essentially runs the party. Well, it's because he's out there. It's because on any given day, and believe me, I get the emails every single day from the White House press pool, what the president's schedule is. He is talking consistently. He is constantly holding, press gaggles in the Oval Office, on Air Force One, in Florida, consistently taking questions from reporters, holding various executive order signing ceremonies. After that, doing 45 minutes of press gaggle where questions all over the map are being lobbed at him. It's no wonder he's the leader of the party. And going back to what we're talking about, they've got President Obama out here doing these ads. He was very similar to that, was constantly speaking to the media, and not anywhere near as much as Trump, but in terms of a presidential administration, was very accessible to media across the United States. And for that, he became the de facto leader. And so I think this is kind of setting up the stage as the Democrats are continuing to wonder where they go nationally. They are looking for a leader. They are looking for somebody to champion these issues. Abigail Spanberger, to me, would be on that short list, but that's only going to happen if this ballot measure is successful in Virginia coming up April the 21st. I mean, she has got a lot on the line for herself coming up later on this year. If she is successful in this, then I think there's a real possibility that you see her continuing to kind of run up the ladder as it relates to the national stage, right? Gavin Newsom is not a palatable individual. He's not going to do it. I mean, he might try, and he may, in fact, win the nomination for president within the Democrat Party and become their nominee, but he doesn't have what it takes to be on the national stage. His track record in the state of California, is a freaking disaster. It's a complete and total mess. I could spend every show for the remainder of this year talking about the failed promises of Gavin Newsom and the failures of the state of California. I'm not going to, but I could. That's how long the list is. So it's not going to be him. And so with that, you've got a couple of other individuals, Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. Their Democrats still seem to love Kamala Harris, the failed vice president, failed presidential candidate. But outside of those, there's really nobody else. I mean, you don't have that individual that is really championing these progressive, championing these left-wing issues and leading the party forward. So for Democrats across the nation, they have got a keen eye on what is going on in Virginia. And guess what? They want to make sure that this process plays out successfully for them. Because if not, I would agree with Politico's assessment in this article. She probably stunts her growth as it relates to growing as a national figure. Now, does that mean that she gets completely thrown to the wayside? No, I don't think so. There's still a lot of time until 2028. There's going to be a big time battle that takes place with Democrats at the top, kind of battling for power. But if she is successful with this ballot measure, then I would argue and I would contend that she will have better odds and a better opportunity of being kind of springboarded onto this national stage. Right? She will be seen by big fat cat Democrat donors that, man, she's got it. She's got the ability to pass and move forward with these very progressive things like this gerrymandering resolution and constitutional amendment in the state of Virginia and delivering for Democrats. For her and her continued political rise, if that's what she wants. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on Abigail Spanberger, but if that's what she wants, then she will have the opportunity to do that with this ballot measure. And so it's interesting to see the infighting going on even within the Democrat Party in the state of Virginia, where Democrats there are claiming she's not carrying the weight that she needs to as it relates to this measure. So very interesting stuff there. We'll keep a close eye on the details as we get as we flip the calendar over to April tomorrow and move through the month of April. We'll keep an eye on that and see exactly how that pans out coming up here in about 3 weeks or so. We'll bring you the latest right here on the Nick Craig Show. I want to thank the law group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program and remind you that if you are dealing with any legal challenges across the eastern half of North Carolina, that you need to reach out to Melissa Gott and her team over at the law group, going all the way back to 2003. Melissa Gott and her experienced group of attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of our state. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. They're located in downtown Wilmington. They're not some big national law firm. Melissa and her team live right here in southeastern North Carolina, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088, or online, lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, we'll grab a quick break and we'll round out a Tuesday edition of the Nick Craig Show coming up after this. We're streaming live each and every weekday morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Tuesday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Switching gears, as we were talking about the ongoing ballot measure in Virginia, we'll, of course, keep an eye on that as we get towards the middle and end of the month of April. I do want to bring up another major story that is making headlines today. Unfortunately, or reading over at the New York Post, gas prices rise above $4 a gallon for the first time in more than 3 years. And so this is, as we've talked about in great detail on the Nick Craig Show over the last couple of weeks, President Donald Trump has got to get this situation in Iran dealt with. I mean, he's got to get it dealt with. Gas prices right now are killing the American people. And unfortunately for him, there is nobody else to point the finger at than this administration. And so he has got to get control of this. Now, let me be clear. It is the end of March. Right? There is a lot of time till the midterm elections. And as gas prices, which I suspect they will in the coming weeks and months, they will continue to moderate and they will likely go down. This is something that has got to be dealt with expeditiously from this administration. According to AAA, which tracks these prices each and every day throughout the year, a gallon of gas now costs more than $4 on average, reaching those levels not seen in more than 3 years. The average cost now stands at $4.01 a gallon compared to just $2.98 1 month ago. So you have seen gas go up across the nation on average, of course, and those prices fluctuate pretty significantly based on what your state's gas tax is. Gas is more expensive in states like New York and California, where they have a much higher fuel tax, versus other states where that is much lower, which the gas tax is added into every single gallon of gasoline that you purchase in the state in which you're purchasing it. This, again, has to be dealt with by this administration. The New York Post writes, there continues to be problems across the nation, with gas prices in Texas hovering around $3.67 per gallon compared to California, which is nearing $6 a gallon, which is no surprise there with their incredibly high gas tax as well. So this is the first time since June of 2022 that gas prices have passed the $5 a gallon mark in some states, just 3 months after Russia launched its invasion against Ukraine. Energy costs have soared due to Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway in which around 20% of the world's oil supply travels through. The White House has always stressed that the short-term energy price fluctuation was a price worth paying for peace, which, yes, there is absolutely some truth to. But there's more to the story than that. And this comes back to a broader discussion over the American electorate, the American population, right? We're talking politics. That's what we're talking about. And so for the vast majority of individuals, and this is hard for myself, and this is probably hard for many of you to wrap your head around, but it's the truth. We are the 1%. You listening to this program today, you are the 1%. You are hyper-informed on the issues. You are not the average run-of-the-mill voter. You're just, most of you are not. I would argue 90+% of you are not the average run-of-the-mill voter. The fact that you are listening to podcasts or talk radio, you are well above the average as it relates to your level of informed discussion and informed conversation. And so the reason that gas prices are such a big deal and the reason that they're such a big factor is because in large part, the American public is uninformed. And that is not meant to be a dig. That is not meant to necessarily be a negative statement or a negative comment. It's just the truth. People are busy. They're busy with their jobs. They're busy with their lives. They're busy with their kids and their families and all of the other things that keeps your day occupied 7 days a week. All of that stuff. And so most people are not hyper-focused on politics. They're just not. Right? They show up to vote every 2 or 4 years. They vote for president, maybe a couple of down ballot races, and then many of them just go home and do it again 4 years later. Now, that's not to say that they're completely oblivious to what's going on. That's not to say that they're completely uninformed. But if you don't follow politics close enough, if you're not tracking this stuff day in and day out, when you see, and as the White House notes, that this is the short-term fluctuation, this is a short-term price to pay for long-standing peace, the vast majority of the American public doesn't care about that. And it's not because they want chaos in the Middle East. It's not because they want war in Iran. It's not because they want any of this stuff to take place. It's because they just don't really care right now. It's not affecting their day-to-day life. And the fact of the matter is, it isn't. And that's the reality, right? The threat in Iran is not on the vast majority of people's minds day in and day out. Now, should it be? I would argue in some respect it should be. Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror. They have proxy organizations that they fund all over the globe. Due to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's incredibly reckless border policies during the previous administration, there are sleeper cells in the United States of America that are waiting for the call to likely pull out a mass terror attack on the United States. So should it be a concern? Yes, but I'm a realist. I've got my ear to the ground. They don't care. They're not interested. But what they do care about is when they go to the gas station and spend $80 filling up their car. When they were able to do that for $45 just back a month or a half ago, now it's $80 to do that. Well, they care about that, right? Because as you're standing there watching the fuel drain into your car, you're watching that dollar sign go up and up and up and up. And so this is the kind of thing that is political in some respects that has a major impact. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, saying, quote, "As for this temporary short-term fluctuation in gas prices, the president has said that once these combat operations are over, the administration is going to continue to unleash energy dominance. We're continuing to do that every day, and we're going to see prices go down at the pump as we have the past year because of this president." The time on this, I believe, is running out. This has got to be dealt with. And don't get me wrong, and I've seen the argument from many on the political right, oh, stop complaining about gas prices. They were way higher under Biden. That's, folks, that is not a good argument to me. I'm sorry. Like, that is just, this is not me being critical of this administration, but I'm just being an honest broker of truth, right? We spent the whole first half of the show talking about being honest and using these things in these terms honestly. I'm being honest. That to me is not a good excuse. Now, you can say that under the Trump administration, prior to the situation unfolding in Iran, that gas prices were way lower than the Biden administration. And that is true. The president's America First energy policy did provide relief at the pumps. It absolutely did. It's why the national average a month ago was under $3 a gallon. And even prior to that was even lower. So yes, there is truth to that. But to me, if your argument is, well, gas prices are still lower now than they were under Joe Biden, you have lost the issue. And that you have lost the message. That is not sufficient for the vast majority of the American public. I think that is it's coping. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It is straight up coping the situation. This administration has got to get this ongoing conflict with Iran wrapped up quickly. The time is starting to run out. This was supposed to be a 4 to 6 week operation. We are approaching the end of that, getting close to the end of that 6 weeks. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. It is constraining the global oil supply, and the American people are paying for it. And frankly, they don't want to. I still have a lot of trust and confidence in this administration and President Donald Trump, and I do believe that he's working towards that. We've seen that unfold over the last week and a half or so. More has to be done as these prices continue to rise. If this does not get resolved quickly, this issue singularly could very well sink the Republicans in 2026. And I'm as dead serious about this as I possibly could be. This is going to and very well could sink the Republicans. I'm not bashing Trump. I'm not bashing this administration. I'm telling you what the real deal is. What do people care about? The prices at the grocery store, gas, their electric bill, their mortgage payment. That's the stuff that they care about. That's the tangible stuff that they have to deal with every single month. In the case of gas, every week or two, depending on how much they travel and how much they need to fill up. I mean, as I mentioned earlier in the show, driving up to Virginia this weekend is about a 5.5, 6 hour drive. I spent like $90 on gas just to get there and back. And so I feel that. You feel that. And so I'm, comment coming in, Trump keeps an airtight council. There are no leaks. All the speculation is just that. Don't get caught up in the doom. And I'm not. All right. That's why I'm not sitting here being like, Donald Trump has failed this process and Donald Trump is doing all this wrong. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying he's got to get the gas prices dealt with. That is a very real thing. And that's not doom. That's not doom scrolling. That's not being negative on the situation, but he's got to get it dealt with. Especially as we head into the summer months, which gasoline is always higher in the summer because there's much more demand. It's got to get dealt with. It has to. I mean, there's no other opportunity. If we go through the entirety of this summer with gas at over $4 a gallon nationally, the Republicans are totally screwed come midterms. Because there's no way that he's going to be able to get these prices down under $3 a gallon in the months leading up to the November election. So, again, I still have a lot of confidence. I still have a lot of trust. I do believe that this administration is working towards a swift resolution of this conflict, but I'm hopeful that the people around the president, the close advisors, and the president himself are seeing the frustration that this is causing for everybody, Democrats and Republicans. I mean, don't sit here and tell me that you're okay with paying higher gas prices because I just don't believe you. Nobody wants to spend $90 to fill up their car. I mean, nobody does. Now, are you interested in maybe some short-term impacts for longer benefits? Yeah, I mean, that was the large discussion about the tariffs, but it's got to be truly short. And so we are approaching the 6-week point in which the president said this has got to be wrapped up. I know that this conflict is very complicated. I know that there's a lot of moving parts. I'm not oblivious or ignorant to any of those facts. But again, it's got to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later because it is starting to very significantly impact the budgets of middle-class Americans, who many of which voted for Donald Trump singularly on the issue of the economy. Singularly on the issue of things were too expensive under the Biden administration. We are seeking economic relief. They did. They are not seeing that right now. And so hopefully the administration has got their eye on the ball with that issue and can continue to move forward with it. So we'll keep an eye on the national gas prices as well. We'll bring you the latest as that continues to fluctuate and go up and go down right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and it's heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Look forward to chatting with everybody on our Patreon hangout tonight. If not, we'll catch up with you tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.